I've seen a fairy. It took me many years to come to terms with that, but once I did, I began feverishly writing and reading about fairies and eventually creating this YouTube channel and sharing other people's encounters. But guess what? The fairy I encountered didn't look like a fairy at all. That is the traditional concept of what we think a fairy looks like. So before we begin, I invite you to keep an open mind. In previous videos, we've explored some of the physical sensations that we feel when fairies are nearby, and also how smells can be a sign of nearby fairies. But seeing fairies, well, that seems the most straightforward of all, doesn't it? Think again. Huey Roney and his son lived in a small thatched house in a town in County Monaghan. One night, the two men were sitting quietly at the fire when the son whispered to his father, "Look at what is sitting in the chimney corner." When the father looked, he saw a little fairy man sewing with a needle and thread. The father spoke to the fairy and said, "You are busy." The fairy replied, "Look at that other fellow, how busy he is," meaning another fairy, and he pointed to the back of the kitchen. Both men turned their heads round to see this other fairy, but there was nothing there. When they turned back to their chimney corner, the fairyman had disappeared. The next bizarre sighting was reported by Douglas Hyde, Irish academic, linguist, Gaelic scholar, and first President of Ireland, and shows us that there is far more to seeing fairies than meets the eye. I myself, when a boy of 11, was perfectly convinced that on a fine, early, dewy morning in summer, when people were still in bed, I saw a strange horse run round a 7-acre field of ours and change into a woman who ran even swifter than the horse, and after a couple of courses round the field, disappeared into our haggard. I am sure, whatever I may believe today, no earthly persuasion would at the time have convinced me that I did not see this. Yet I never saw it again, and never heard of anyone else seeing the same. Of course, there are loads of sightings of fairies, and I've collected just a few particularly unexpected and weird ones for you today, which I hope that you're going to enjoy. Here's one that shows us sometimes we don't know we've been in the company of fairies until later. There is an island which is between Inishmurray and the mainland opposite. It is only seen once every 7 years. I saw it myself, and so did 4 or 5 others with me. I know a boatman from Sligo named Carr who took 2 strange men with him towards Inishmurray, and they disappeared at the spot where the island is, and he thought they'd fallen overboard and been drowned. Carr saw one of the same men in Ballyconnolly in County Donegal some 6 months or so after it happened, and with great surprise said to him, "Is it you I saw drowned near Inishmurray?" "Yes," the man said, and then asked, "Do you see me?" "Yes," answered Carr. "But," said the man again, "you do not see me with both eyes." Then Carr closed one eye to be sure, and found that he saw him with one eye only, and he told the man which one it was. At this information, the fairy man blew on Carr's face, and Carr never saw him again. If those men were indeed members of the fairy folk, we must wonder why they just disappeared from the boat. I think this is a great example of them simply not caring. You know, they couldn't give an arse if a human saw them disappear in front of their eyes. And we find this in other encounters too. A certain flippancy, if you like, to having a human see, hear or smell them and be aware of their presence or where they dwell. And this mysterious island where they disappeared, could it be the elusive island of High Brazil? Now that subject deserves a video in itself. Some fairies just don't seem to care who sees them. Until they do. Then, and only then, they take action. So, from our perspective, it can all seem quite random. But there is always an exception, isn't there? And on a rare occasion, we find that their reasons for allowing humans to see them are truly fascinating. Sick persons are often said to be with the fairies, and when cured, to have come back. A woman who died here about 30 years ago was commonly believed to have been with the fairies during her 7 years of sickness when she was a young woman. She married after coming back and had children, and she was always able to see the fairies and talk with them, for she had the second sight. And it is said that she used to travel with the fairies at night time. The ability to see fairies is a rare gift which is bestowed by the fairies. And of course, it must be given. It cannot be taken or bargained, traded or stolen from fairies. It is a gift which could be taken away or altered at any time too. On Connor's Island, my uncle, Dan Quinn, lived alone, and he often used to see big crowds of the fairies come into his house and play music and dance. The house would be full of them, but they caused him no fear. Once, on such an occasion, one of them came up to him as he lay in bed and, giving him a green leaf, told him to put it in his mouth. When he did this, instantly he could not see the fairies anymore, but could still hear their music. Uncle Dan always believed that within the group of fairy folk, he recognised some of his friends who had drowned. My uncle was a quiet old man, and he never talked much, but I know that this story is as true as can be, and that the fairies always took an interest in him. Seeing fairies is no simple matter. It can be complicated, confusing, and take time to understand. If you enjoyed this video, check out the one on screen now. It's a beauty. Until next time, stay curious and be kind. Cheerio!